see. Hi, everybody. We've got some people still joining us in the room, so we're just going to give everybody a couple more minutes here before we get started. Hope you guys are all doing well.
Hi, Amber. How are you doing?
Hi. Hi there.
This is Scott. Scott and Cindy.
Hey, Scott. How you
Is
doing,
it,
Cindy?
so do we need to hit that? No?
You're
Okay,
good.
Oh, there we are.
What I'll do is, as we get started, I'll go ahead and mute everybody off, just because
Okay.
there's
Yeah.
background noise. But it's no problem. It's
Yep.
for everybody. I've got two monitors going here to be able to read. So, hi, Brian. How you doing? So for those of you that have not been in a webinar before, although if you hadn't before, you likely have now. Thank you, COVID. There's a million webinars going on. Just a couple of quick notes. I am going to mute everybody's mics off just because when we get started, it picks up a lot of background noise. But that being said, I truly intend tonight to be a conversation. So I'll obviously open up to whatever questions you might have at the end, but please feel free to make this a two-way conversation and turn your mics on or turn your mics off when you're finished and ask me any questions that you have. I have some things planned that I want to go through, but I also have, you know, I'm open to whatever you guys, I want to make sure I can try to answer your questions if at all possible. So please don't hesitate to turn off and on your mics and make this a two-way chat tonight. The other thing is as you can see behind me, I apologize. Usually I have prettier backgrounds for my webinars, but I bit off more than I could chew over the weekend, and I repainted my office, and I'm painting my closet doors, and then decided to add trim, and then decided that I saw something on Pinterest I really liked, and I haven't gotten them hung back up yet. So I'm sorry that you're looking at all of my office organization behind me. Usually there's pretty doors there, but it's not going to happen until this weekend, I don't think. I've been trying to get it finished and it hasn't happened. So one of my quarantine projects. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I see the people that were coming in the room are in now. Hi, everybody. How are you? Couple of quick things. So yes, please feel free to use your mics. And I have two monitors going. It's just me on tonight, so I will try to keep an eye on the chat box, but I can't always look at the chat. I don't always notice things coming in the chat box. Certainly, if you have any questions and you don't want to chime in, and honestly, please do. I'm happy to make this a conversation. But if for some reason you don't and you have a question, you want to throw it up in that chat box, that's totally fine, because at the end of the night, I'll go through that and make sure that if I haven't answered those questions, I'll get to them. And if you brought along any questions of things you want to know about, certainly we can chat about that tonight too. I've got a little bit of an agenda, but other than that, I'm going to make this a little bit different so that my toolbar doesn't hit it. Yeah, I've got a little bit of stuff that I want to, some stuff I want to go through, but certainly if you have any questions on things, please stop and ask me, or, questions unrelated to what we're dealing with. I'm certainly happy to talk about them. Okay, so the other thing is we are going to be recording this, and it takes a couple of days for them to process the video and get it back to us, but you'll be getting a follow-up email from me with the video recording of tonight. So don't feel like you have to take a bunch of notes if you don't want to. You will get the video recording of this as well. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you guys all tonight. This is the webinar series for 2020. I don't know if you guys have joined into other ones that we've done this year, but we do webinars throughout the year. Some of them we do monthly. This is one that we have not done in a very long time, and it's a completely different version than the homeowners ones we've done in the past. So this is all new info. And I really focused on some of the new laws that affect homeowners in 2020. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. If you guys have not met me, hi, I'm Amber Pierce, and a little bit about me. I'm originally from Michigan, and I'm a graduate of Michigan State University. I've got two boys, 12 and 16. The 16-year-old was a baby when I moved to Mexico, and the 12-year-old was born there, so he's a dual citizen. I began visiting Puerto Morelos. If you don't know where Puerto Morelos is, it's just south of Cancun in 1998, and I moved there full time in 2004. And I'm the broker and owner of a company called Mayan Riviera Properties, and we do this series of webinars every year. And this is one of my favorite things to do through the office. This is one of my favorite roles. I really enjoy doing these. I started this webinar series. It was a weekly workshop in our office that people would come into, and we moved them online some years ago so that more people could join in. I wanted to provide really good information, the information that I wish I'd had when I got started. I got into real estate kind of on the back end of things. People came to me asking me for properties for sale because there were no real estate offices in Puerto Morelos at the time. And at that time, we were working with investment groups and buying and selling property, building, remodeling, doing commercial projects, doing residential projects. I've been a landlord. I've had landlords over time. And then my company does various real estate roles. So I tell you all this personal information to say that I've lived there a while. I run my own company there. I have children there, so we've done the whole school system thing. I deal with filing taxes in two countries, all of those things. And so I hope that I can bring that expertise and my experiences as an expat to you in a whole bunch of different ways. But tonight we're going to focus on some things I think that homeowners really need to understand and know about their properties. This is my company. If you're not familiar with it, it's called Mayan Riviera Properties. I started it in 2006, and we do three things at the office. We do real estate sales, we do vacation rentals, and we do property management and condominium association management. I'm federally certified twice. I'm federally certified to sell real estate in Mexico and also to sell it within its tourist zones. And I am also state licensed by our state of Quintana Roo to sell real estate. I'm a member of two different organizations. The one in green, AMPI, that's the Mexican Association of Realtors. And then I'm also an international member of NAR, which is the US Association of Realtors. So I'm members of both of those organizations. And I always throw her, Laura might be on. I know she's going to join us tonight. She was in the middle of doing some things, not on yet. She may be joining in with us tonight, but she is a buyer agent at my office. And I always throw this up here because if you contact us, you're likely going to speak with me or Laura, and you can just put a face with a name. But she's a buyer agent in our office. She's been selling for even longer than I have. Two of us have been selling. We figured it out this year, 40 years combined between the two of us. So we're always happy to answer your questions. This is my disclaimer for the night. I'm about to share a lot of information that has to do with new laws, new accounting practices, and I'm not an attorney and I'm not an accountant. So, I want you to understand this information, but if you're going to really apply it, my disclaimer is that you probably should speak to an attorney to really find out how it applies to your situation. But I want to put some things on your radar that are new and some things that aren't so new, but things I thought you should know. Okay? So with that, what are we going to talk about? I want to make sure everybody understands their paperwork. It was surprising to me. I was recently in a condominium association meeting, and I added this to the webinar after being in that meeting, where it was a fairly big association, and several people took me aside and said, hey, will you go through my paperwork and just show me what's what? And I realized there are a lot of people that don't even understand the papers that they're looking at. And so as the most basic thing, I want to make sure you know that. There's a series of things that you should do after closing, and I want to make sure that you have those in order. If you're making home improvements, there's a way to make those deductible against capital gain and that you have on the property, and I want to make sure you're doing that correctly. We're going to talk about vacation rentals as well as long-term rentals and some of the taxes and new laws that apply that are new for 2020. We're going to talk about some money transfer services, and then we're going to talk about some basic estate planning. It's not a real fun topic to think about, but it's one that I think is really important. And so we're going to talk about that. That's what I have to focus on tonight. But honestly, if you guys have any other questions and we kind of get off on a tangent, that's okay. I want to make sure that you guys get out of this what you need to. So with that, let's get started. And like I said, please feel free to chime in and ask any questions that you have. So I want you to understand your paperwork, okay? When you closed with the notary, all right, you were provided, likely that day or at least that week, you were provided with a provisional copy of what you had signed. Now, the notary wasn't done that day, right? You guys signed, I'm assuming a lot of you guys are foreigners, and I'm assuming you have trust banks. So there were 3 parties that had to sign that. The trust bank had to sign, you had to sign, and the seller had to sign. Sometimes the trust bank isn't always present at your physical closing, and if they aren't, that's when you often get that provisional copy back after they've signed. But anyway, you would have gotten a provisional copy, and that provisional copy would look just like this. It's a long sheet of paper, okay? It's not standard size, it's the long size paper, has colored stamps on it. These are stamps from the state of Quintana Roo. I've seen other state stamps that look different. Ours happen to usually be blue. But regardless, you would have a, this as a document. Then the notary wasn't finished. The notary had to, if you recall, you paid acquisition taxes. The seller paid capital gain tax, likely. There were municipal fees involved. He has to go pay all of those things. And he'd done a bunch of due diligence prior to the sale and collecting the certificate of no liens, and he got all of your guys' passports and IDs. All of those steps, the avalul, all those things that were required for that sale. He collects all of those documents and the receipts for all of the payments he must make post-closing. He gathers all of that up and he takes it to the registrar of deeds in your state. Now, in our state of Quintana Roo, if you have property here, our office is in Cancun. Okay, so he or she would have taken those papers into Cancun, and the registry would have registered that sale, okay, and officially recorded it. And after that, you would have gotten back, typically when it comes back from the notary, it's in an envelope of some sort, the deed, which are the long pages, as well as the document we're going to talk about next, and then all of the addendums at the back, which are copies of everything that he did in the due diligence process to verify chain of title and all the steps that were required for that closing, okay? So if you only have long sheets of paper, you just have the provisional copy. Sometimes if you didn't use a real estate agent or sometimes the closing offices have them and for some reason somebody doesn't get called, you want to make sure that you have that full document. The full document being, it's usually in a folder, it's the long papers with the addendums at the back, okay? Anybody have any questions about that? Does that make sense to everybody before we move on? This is what I was just mentioning, you get that provisional copy, then you get exactly what you signed again, plus all of the additions at the back. The addition at the back, this is what's important. Of all of those, I'm going to grab a little highlighter here. Of all of those papers, that thick bunch of papers at the back, one is the most important. And most notaries either put it as the top of those addendums, the very top sheet, or some of them will staple it to the inside of the front cover of the folder that they give you. But it's called the Boleta de Registro, okay? What Boleta de Registro means is it's a ticket of registry. So when he took it to the public registry, had that deed publicly recorded, he would have given it to them, and they give it back with the folio. As you see, I wrote file number here, right? So what this does is this shows that it was officially recorded in the public registry. So when people ask you for a complete copy of your deed, or what they call an escritura, let's say you go into we'll talk about this in a minute, you have to change your property tax name, or for some reason, some sort of anything that you need a full copy of your deed, you're going to need all of those long pages. Okay, you're going to need all of these. And then you're also going to need this sheet, which is the Boleta de Registro. You don't have to have all the other addendums at the back, but that is the completed copy of your deed along with the sheet that shows it was publicly registered. Okay, that is your deed. All right, now your deed is in Spanish. It's a Spanish document. If you have any questions about it and you're in Puerto Morelos, you are always welcome to come see me, and I will walk you through anything in that document that you have questions about if you don't speak Spanish. But I always recommend to people that you scan that deed along with at least this sheet of paper and put that in, save it in your Google Docs, save it somewhere up in the cloud, in your cloud, savings, in order to make sure that, if anything happens to that original, you've got that. At the end of the day, there were plenty of people that lost their originals in Hurricane Wilma, right? For instance, and that was well before there was a lot of online backup. If you lose your original, it's not the end of the world. You still own your property, but you do have to go get a certified copy from the public registry, and they charge you per page, and at least they do in ours. So I always recommend that you store your original in a safe place, and then make a scanned copy of that you can access. I think somebody just joined in on the chat and asked me something. Paula asks, how long does it take to receive those? That's a good question. So Paula, I can at least, Paula, are you in Puerto Morelos? Just as because it may vary by state. At least in ours, the deal is that notary has 90 days to finish the transaction. Okay. And then they don't typically take 90 days, but they have 90 days. Oh, not yet. I'm still in Michigan. Okay. So they have 90 days to do their work on it, although usually they don't take that long. They usually take about 30 to 45 days. And then once they submit it to the public registry has the obligation to give that document back to the notary in another 90 days. So you'll have your provisional copy right away, either the day of closing or as soon as the bank signs, which is within a couple of days. That provisional copy you'll have right away. But this finalized copy, if the notary takes their full time of 90 days and the public registry takes their full time of 90 days, you're going to have 180 days before that deed comes back. And it'll come back to your notary office, or it will come back to your title company that you used. Typically, they should reach out to you, although I know a lot of notary offices are not good about reaching out to people to let them know their deeds are there, and they have a pile of them sitting there. So I say all this to say, if you don't have your finalized copy, contact your notary and go get it. There's one caveat to this, okay? And that is old deeds. If you've had your property for a while, I believe it was in 2005 that they made the change. It didn't used to be an electronic file. Okay, now the public registry has all this in an electronic file with that electronic file number I mentioned. Before that, it was registered in books and taken to the notaries, kept them for a certain amount of time, and then they go to Chetamall. And I'll say that they still do it in books and they still go to Chetamall, but that's not the public registry anymore. It's an electronic file system. But I'm going to grab my highlighter again. If the last page of your deed has this on the back, this big stamp that they then write the registry information in, you'll notice this was from August of 2004. Okay, if this is before the public registry would issue that Boleta de Registro. Okay, you have an older deed that predates that electronic file system. So the only thing I'll say about this is that if you happen to have a deed that looks like this, totally fine. But there is a very small thing you need to do. You need to go to your public registry and take your deed with you along with your ID, and they will enter it into the system and give you a Boleta de Registro with a file number. You do have to. They don't do it automatically. It's a manual thing, and you need to update it. So if for some reason you have one of these old deeds, no big deal, but It's not expensive. It doesn't take long. I think it takes like 10 days or something, and they give you back your bolletta de registro with your electronic file number. Okay. That's the only update. You need to do that if you have one of those old deeds that were on the non-electronic system. Okay. Anybody have any questions about that and about their deeds? Does that make sense to everybody? Don't see anything in chat, so I think we're good. Okay. So moving forward, once you've closed, okay, and what I mean by closing is, you've signed it, the notary, you've gotten the keys, you have possession of your place, you've got that provisional copy of what you've signed. What do you need to do? You need to change any of the utilities into your name. So water, electricity, primarily. If you have internet and things like that that got transferred as well, you want to put those in your name too. But you want to get your water and your electricity into your name. And you can do that using that provisional copy that you were given. Okay? So you're going to need a copy of your ID. You're going to need a copy of your provisional deed along with the original. Usually you got to take both, the copy and the original. You go in and you solicit that they put it in your name. You want your full legal name. So the name that appears in your passport, the name is the same name that appears in your deed. My name, is Amber Pierce, but my full name is Amber Ray Pierce. So on my utilities, I have my full legal name, just as it appears in my passport. And you want to make sure that it reflects the address that's in your property tax bill, your actual address. Okay, so make sure it meets your legal address is in your property tax bill. Make sure it's got that address with your full legal name. Okay, why do you need to do that? Well, number one, if you ever have a problem with any of those utilities and you call to make a report and it's not in your name, you won't be able to make a report. Okay, number two, you need to have it in your name because a lot of times for many, many, many things, they're going to ask you for a proof of address, and you're not going to have one if it's not in your name, and your address isn't a proof of address if it doesn't match your tax bill. So for that reason alone, you want to do that. Your bank's going to ask you for it. Your internet company is going to ask you for it. Your notary might ask you for it when you go to close, when you want to sell your property. Anything that you need a proof of address for, you're going to need those bills in your name. Okay? Now, I can only speak for the municipality of Puerto Morelos. I've not, and in Cancun, because we have the same laws. I can't speak to, I know that if you have property, for instance, in Playa del Carmen, which is a different municipality in our state, the change of name on your taxes happens automatically. So this may or may not apply depending on where you own your property in Mexico, but at least in our municipality and in Cancun's municipality, it is a manual change. So once you get that full deed back from the public registry, 6 months after closing, okay, with your deed and your bolletta de registro, you're going to go into your catastro office, your local catastro office, and change your name on your property tax bill. Now, if you're a foreigner, they don't actually put Amber Ray Pierce. They put the name of my trust bank. Okay, so my trust is at Banco del Bajío. So on my property tax, they will put the actual trust bank name in instead of my own. Okay, totally fine. If you're in a municipality where they put your full legal name, that's absolutely fine. What you don't want is the previous name of a previous owner. You want it to be updated into your information. Okay, and like I said, this is automatically changed in a lot of municipalities. Unfortunately, in Puerto Morelos, it's something you have to do separately. But you do have to wait. You can't do that with that provisional copy like you can with your utilities. You have to wait until you get that full deed copy back. Okay. The next thing you should do right after closing, I'd wait maybe a month after your closing and then call your bank. I'm so surprised. There are so many people that don't really know how to get a hold of their bank or know who their bank representative is. At most banks, you're going to have a designated rep. Some banks don't, but a lot of banks do. Call them, contact your bank, find out who your bank rep is if you have a designated one. Ask them, because when you buy, part of your fees includes your first year of your trust. Okay. But find out from them, hey, when does my trust renew? Okay. Because some banks tend to start it for a year from when you sign, and some banks start it a year from when it comes out of the public registry. So just find out what your bank does, find out when your renewal date is, find out how you can pay that, right? Hopefully you have a bank. I love Banco del Bajío for that reason. I can give them a credit card and they do it over the phone. Some only take wire transfers. But find out how you need to pay. Find out when your next payment's due. Know your file number. So if you have to call back in, most banks will give you an internal file number and say, oh, in our system, you're XYZ. Find out that file number. That way when you call them up or you do have to do a wire transfer, you can put that in the memo. Know your file number if they've designated one for you. And just, talk to your bank. It's also in your deed, but inside that deed, if I'm married and I'm Mrs. Pierce and there's a Mr. Pierce, okay, there's not, but if there were a Mr. Pierce, oftentimes our trusts read, if anything ever happens to me, it goes to him, and if anything should ever happen to him, it all comes to me, and if anything should ever happen to the both of us as primary beneficiaries, we're the first level, then the trust transfers to our designated second beneficiaries, and little Susie is one and she gets 50%, and little Johnny gets the other 50%. Okay? Make sure that your bank has, the notary set that up for you, but it never hurts to just confirm, what do you have on file? Are their names spelled correctly? This is the one thing that I want to stress to you. If God forbid something should happen to Mr. and Mrs. Pierce and their heirs show up, and you do not have their names as they appear in their passports, it can be a lot of hassle. So if your kids get married or divorced or whatever, keep that updated with your bank. Okay. It doesn't mean, if they end up getting married and you forget, it's okay. It's not like they're not going to be able to receive your inheritance. But they do have to go and get marriage certificates and apostilles and all sorts of things at a time when they probably don't want to be doing that. So keep your contact information up to date with your bank if your contact information changes, and certainly if the contact information or details of your beneficiaries change. Okay? Keep your bank in the loop on any of that, because they are the ones that are going to help your heirs if need be. Okay? Those are steps that I suggest everybody take after closing. Those are things just to make sure that everything's in order and you understand what you need to do from there on out. Okay? Okay. People ask me all the time, should I get a visa? Do I need to be a permanent? No. Do I need to be a permanent resident or a temporary resident, or what's the deal? We're going to go through that. Okay? Why would you get a visa? Now I'm going to tell you, there's plenty of people that come down to Mexico. They come down for a few weeks or a few months at a time. They come in as tourists. They don't need a car. They might rent a car, or they live here without, a car. They just use public transportation. Do you have to have a visa? Well, I'm going to tell you why you would want one, and then you can make a decision as to whether or not you get it. Okay? One is if you want to stay for an extended period of time in Mexico. All right? So if you come in as a tourist, you're limited to 180 days. If you want to stay longer than 180 days in Mexico, you need to get a visa. If you're going to open a bank account, you're going to need a visa. If you want, this is kind of a side perk, but if you have your visa, you can use that to get local discounts at golf courses and theme parks and restaurants and things like that. So use it. If you want to get a job in Mexico, you're going to need your visa. If you want to own a business in Mexico, you're going to need one. You're going to need one if you buy a car. okay? Because you've got to be able to register that car, and to register that car, you're going to need a visa or a driver's license in Mexico. You're going to need one. If you need a senior card, discount card, or you enroll in school, or you're enrolling in public health insurance, this is a big one as a homeowner. If you're going to file any kind of income tax from either income that you make in Mexico or income you make on rentals, things like that, you're going to need a tax ID number, so you're going to need a visa. Basically, this visa, whether it's temporary or permanent, allows you to have two critical numbers. It allows you to get a CORP and an RFC. In Mexico, you know, in the United States, as a US citizen, I have one number, I have a social security number. But in Mexico, I actually have two. So one is a social number and one's an RFC number, okay? And when you have both of those, that allows you to do all of this. But there is a definite advantage to permanent residence when you own property, and that is you have a partial exemption on your capital gains tax. So even if you live in Mexico and you don't really need any of those benefits, okay, there may be a real benefit to you in becoming a permanent resident because of potential capital gain tax liability. Okay, so think about that. And even if you're in the situation where you don't really need it for any other reason, there's likely a very good benefit for you in the end by getting that and with your capital gain. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit. The CORP is your social ID number and your RFC is your tax ID number. And another important thing to just kind of remind you is just because you go and get your residency visa does not mean you're a Mexican citizen. Okay, it means you're a resident. So like if you're a US citizen, it's like you have your green card. Okay, you're a resident, you're not a citizen. All right, that's an important distinction and one that sometimes people confuse. If you're interested in getting a visa, we have a webinar about getting your visas, all about it, about obtaining a temporary resident visa or a permanent resident visa. We talk with Melly Arceo, who's an immigration specialist, and go through this whole thing. I don't want to take the time to do that tonight because if it interests you, it's an entire other session, but it's there and I'll show you how to access this, okay? The other thing is that you want to add, once you get your visa and you have your tax ID number, you're going to add that to your electricity bill. This is important for when you go to closing and the notary is going to ask you for that now. This is a new update. I have just had the notaries start asking me this year for this. You need to add your tax ID number to your CFE bill in order for me to be able to help you qualify for the capital gains tax exemption. So pay attention to that. That's new, okay? The other thing is that some people say, well, I'm not really interested in selling right now, so I'm not going to mess with a visa. If you are a homeowner, it is my sincere suggestion that you understand capital gain tax law. And again, that is its own session in its entirety. And we have a webinar that we've done about that, and I would sincerely suggest that you watch it. If you have a property that's less than $500,000 in value, there will be a real and significant difference in your capital gain tax, okay? If you have a multi-million-dollar property, there is a luxury cap on this tax in Mexico, and so the value of it diminishes. But especially if you have a property that's $220,000, $250,000 and under, you can be potentially completely exempt. So one, you need to understand how that tax works. If you have any questions about that, watch that webinar. We go through how it works. We answer some questions. This is a video recording, so we answer some questions and then watch through the questions, because then I come back and I go through a whole example of how that tax works. It's long, it's a little bit complicated, but I think we walk you through it enough that you'll understand how it works. The moral of this story is, to be able, the way the tax laws read now, you have to be a permanent resident in Mexico. And it takes, for most people don't get to jump the line, okay? You have to meet certain standards. Let me kind of back up. It takes 4 years to become a permanent resident, okay? You have your temporary residency first, and you have that for 4 years, and then you become a permanent resident. Some people are able to jump the line and become permanent residents immediately. If you can, great, do it. But there's only a limited number of people that can do that. This is why I would tell you that don't wait. I have so many people come to my office and they've decided that they need to sell for maybe even unexpected reasons, and they're not going to be able to take advantage of that because they didn't set themselves up to do this. So the time starts ticking as soon as you find out about it. Go get your visa, do your temporary, get through that for 4 years, and you'll automatically be a permanent resident if you don't immediately qualify. Okay, and I'm going to show you, like I said, I'll show you at the end of this how we access these so you can watch them. But I want you to be aware, because waiting until you have to sell unexpectedly, or you're thinking of selling, it's going to be too late for most of you to be able to do that. All right, so go ahead and get that visa started now. Okay, so this also relates to that whole capital gain tax. Capital gain tax is called ISR. All right, and ISR lets you deduct certain things. It lets you deduct your real estate commissions. So anything you'd pay to your realtor when you're selling your home is deductible. It lets you deduct notary fees, and it lets you deduct capital improvements that you make in the property, which are home improvements. Now, capital improvements are things that improve the value of the home. If you, does somebody have a question? No, we're okay? I heard somebody's mic come on, so I thought maybe somebody had a question. Please stop me if you have any questions. So if you're doing something that improves the value of your property, in other words, if you fix a leaky sink, you can't remit the plumber's receipt, okay? Because that didn't really add value to property. That's a simple maintenance item. But if you improve things, let's say I put in granite countertops, or I add an addition to the house, or I upgrade my air conditioning to either put it in or put in inverters. If you're doing things that add value to the home, those are deductible. But I want to make sure everybody on this webinar understands you have to have a factura and it has to meet certain requirements. So does anybody on this webinar not understand what a factura is? I don't want to belabor it if everybody does. Basically in Mexico, that receipt, you can't go to Home Depot and walk out with the receipt and have that be a deduction. You have to have the legal registered receipt, which is a factura. I think that most people that buy property in Mexico, by the time you get there, you know what a factura is. Does anybody have any questions about that, about what it is versus a normal receipt? Are we okay on that point? If we're not, I'll walk through it, but it's a registered receipt. It's going to have your full legal name at the top. So Amber Ray Pierce is going to be up on the thing, matches my passport, matches my deed, okay? Once you have your visa, you can get your RFC number. So you're going to put your tax ID number, your RFC number in there. Or if for some reason you are making home improvements and you don't yet have your visa, still get your factura. There's a generic number that you can use. This is the generic number for foreigners, okay, to use. Get those. Because by the time you go to close, if you've gotten your visa and you've gotten your RFC number, you can still use these. So don't not get these facturas just because you don't have a tax ID number. You can use this one, all right? Now, if you never go get your visa and you never have a tax ID number, then, a permanent resident visa, I should say. If you never get permanent residency and you never have a tax ID, you're not going to be able to use these, okay? But if you do, then you can, okay? The next thing, so that's up at the top, okay, of that factura. Inside the factura, there's an area for description. That description needs to be very clear in 2 ways. Number 1, it needs to clearly describe what the improvement is. So don't let them put general or general work or something really mucky. Have them put, labor to install granite, granite material, right? Like have them line it out what it is. Don't put something that can be left well, is that a home improvement or not, right? Construction maintenance, or I've seen like general maintenance. Don't have them put that, right? Because maintenance isn't deductible. So make sure those factors that they're giving you have really clear descriptions on what those are. All right. The other thing that description area needs to put, whether it's in the memo, whether it's in the bottom, it needs to include your property address. I, as an owner, could have 3 or 4 homes. So how do I prove that even if, let me kind of back up, at the top, it's going to have a section for my address, but that's where my legal domicile is, right? So let me give you an example. My name's Amber Pierce. I live at 123 Main Street, and that's where I'm legally domiciled, and that's where my tax ID is domiciled. So it's going to say Amber Pierce, 123 Main Street, and my RFC, my tax ID number, up at the top. But this is an improvement that I'm making at 345 2nd Street. Well, how do they know that? They only know that because, so when I go to sell at 2nd Street and I show up with a factura and it doesn't have an address in the description of where this improvement took place, they have no way to connect that improvement to that home. So not only does the description need to be clear that it's an actual home improvement in some way, whether you're putting in a pool, whether you're, whatever it is, but you also need to have them add what the property address is. So oftentimes it'll say, pool installation, property located at, and then the legal address as it appears on your property tax bill. Okay? Make sure you include that address because that links that expense to that particular property. All right? The information up at the top is your personal information of where your personal tax ID is domiciled, not the address where the work is going on. Okay? Is that clear? You want to make sure you keep these. I always suggest that you make an online folder. Use Google Docs, it's free. Make an online folder and save all your facturas in that folder so that when you go to close, you've got them all. Okay, because now they're electronic files, so it's easy to save. Okay, that's how you make your home improvements deductible. Moving on to rentals. There is a new law. Okay, the new law is called Ley de Extinción de Dominio. I'm gonna grab my highlighter here, right here. Ley de Extinción de Dominio. This law took effect in January 2020. The intention of it was to be able to have law enforcement be able to put more teeth into the prosecution of organized crime. And it's modeled after laws that they have implemented and had very good success with in South American and Central American countries. So this is law really going after cartel, gangs, human trafficking, okay? And sometimes, like, what was it, the famous one, isn't it Al Capone? He didn't get busted for his organized crime. I think he was the gangster that got busted for putting racketeering and putting in information and sending it in the mail across state lines, right? They got him on other things. This is kind of the same thing. It's other ways that they can deal with this. I'll give you an example. So a lot of properties, if I'm Pablo Escobar, right? Very renowned drug dealer, no longer alive. But let's say I'm Pablo Escobar. I may own a lot of different properties all over. Those properties may be in my name. Those properties may be in somebody else's name as a straw man, right? They call it a prestanombre in Spanish, where in an attempt to hide assets, they stick them in somebody else's name, but they're really mine. And a lot of these guys view this as, well, I might go down, right? They may catch me one day, but my family, which is very important to this culture, my family, their children will have all of these assets So even if I go, they still have all that. They really tried to take a bite out of that to say, not so fast. Okay. This new law basically allows them to confiscate those properties. Okay. So now you're asking me, Amber, why are we talking about this? I'm not Pablo Escobar. Fair enough. Okay. But what it does say is that if you're complicit and you are allowing illegal activity in your property, it is up for confiscation. So, how do you know that the person renting your place isn't using it for human trafficking? Okay. How do you know that the person who's renting your place isn't dealing drugs out of it? And these are probably more applicable to long-term rentals than short-term rentals. But how do you know? Well, how can you protect yourself as a landlord? Now, I tell you all this not because I want you to be scared. Okay. There are very easy ways to do this. The law is not looking to grab property from people that are being honest, okay? This law and all of its intentions and the spirit of this law are to stop people who are either doing it themselves or accessories to it, okay? But let me give you an example, all right? I own a home. Mr. Pablo Escobar probably isn't going to come in and sign under Pablo Escobar. Okay, maybe he's got fake IDs. Okay, so he comes in, I don't recognize him. He comes in as Enrique Dominguez, let's say. Okay, and so I go to a notary republic and sign my long-term rental contract with him, and he shows the notary his ID that he's Enrique Dominguez, and I show mine, and in that rental contract, there's a clause that says that all of these, the renter hereby testifies that all of his funds have come from legal sources. And I, as a landlord, have his contact information and a copy of his ID that he presented along to the notary. I've asked him where his, the basic application you would for a rental, right? Who is he employed by? I called that employer. I make a note, called employer on this day, and they verified his employment. All those things that you would do with a tenant, right? Anyway, well, if he turns out to be Pablo Escobar, you did your part. You acted in good faith, okay? You did your part. You acted in good faith. The law isn't looking to take that property. Now, what if you didn't do all that? What if you said, oh, I'm not renting with notarized rental contracts, and oh, I'm not actually reporting my rental income. They're just borrowing that house. So I'm going to tell the law they're borrowing that house, and they're going to go, really? So this guy just comes in and you just let him have your house. You don't collect any income on that. You don't have any contact information. You had no idea who he was. He's been there for how long? Things start to get very fishy, okay? And you don't want to muddy those waters, all right? This is why you want to have notarized rental contracts. You want to be reporting your rental income, and you want to have things set up so that you entered agreements in good faith, okay? This is not intended to talk you out of renting long term. That isn't it. But basic normal steps that you would do with any tenant will allow you to cover yourself for this law, okay? As a property management company, my staff has had training on what are signs of human trafficking, right? What are signs of drug dealing? Are there different vehicles? Are people coming in and out of the houses? Do they, are they, different signs that they're acting suspicious, things like that. So I, as a company, if anything ever happens, I can come and say, look, you know what, it's really unfortunate that was happening, but all of our staff has been trained in this, certificate and blah, 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 blah. So I have some obligations under this law as well as a rental manager, okay? But you as a property owner, just want to make sure that you've done what you're supposed to make sure you're acting in good faith, okay? Like I said, this is more geared toward long-term rentals, but in vacation rentals, the same. In our vacation rental contracts, we have a clause that says that the funds that are being used to pay for this rental are from legal sources and not illicit funds. And as well, the renter agrees that they will abide by all the laws of the state of Quintana Roo while they're a tenant in that property. Okay. And that way, and if they don't, you're subject to eviction. That's in our vacation rental contract. All right. And that's actually, and this is not new. This has been in our vacation rental contract for a long time. Okay. This isn't really new, but if yours doesn't include that, you might want to do that. That's just kind of a good CYA policy for that. Okay. Make sure you have the identity of the person renting your house. When they check in, they have to have a copy of their passport on file, just like you'd have to at a hotel, right? Those are things that you need to do to make sure you're doing your part. Okay. That was the ley de dominio. Any questions about that before we move on? Is that really clear to everybody? Just want to make sure before we continue on. Anybody else have questions? There is going to be a Q&A session at the end. Any others? We good? All right, I'm going to keep chugging. Please, if you have any questions, please enter them in that chat box, or like I said, turn off your mic or turn on your mic and ask me. You're welcome to ask me, okay? Let's go on to the next new law. The next new law is really, I think, not the end, but a step in the process where Mexico has made it very clear that they are turning their attention into the vacation rental industry. Certainly, you know, Mexico's not alone in this. The United States, Canada, all these countries that have Airbnbs have done this. A lot of it is pushed by the hotel industry. There's obviously a conflict between the hotel industry and the vacation rental industry. The hotel industry is pretty livid with the vacation rental industry. It's taking away their market share. And their argument is look, you know, when people go to a hotel, they have to pay an occupancy tax and an EVA tax. And these guys over here, they're renting out their place and they're not having to pay any of that. And so people go there and it's unfair business practice. And so the hotel industry pushes for vacation rental industry to be integrated into the governmental systems that hotels are. On the other side, governments are interested. Governments are interested because if they need to understand, well, they're interested, one, from a revenue source, right? Obviously, right? More tax money coming in for revenue. But if they need to understand how many people they have. I mean, when you plan for emergency evacuations or, you know, infrastructure, things like that, they need to understand how many people are occupying these places. So the government also has an interest in this. And it's become, you know, when it rises to the point of a critical mass, then they start paying attention. And this has happened repeatedly all over. Mexico is no different. There are areas, these tourist areas, they've met a critical mass. In Puerto Morelos, and this was 2 years ago, there was as many rooms on Airbnb as there were in hotels. Okay, and that was 2 years ago. So I would submit to you that it's likely there are now more. Puerto Morelos is interested in this. Now, I'll say that a lot of this has obviously been temporarily diverted because of the whole COVID issue, right? A lot of these laws came out, the Ley de Extinción de Dominio and this law came out, and there hasn't been a ton of follow-up on it yet because they've been dealing with other stuff, okay? Once we can get back, this COVID, this law is on the books. It was effective January 1st. Puerto Morelos has already said we're going to make it a priority. They want vacation rentals to, one, have a license, and two, be paying taxes. Okay? So what's the first step? This is a national law. This is not specific to Puerto Morelos, but a national law that went into effect in January 1 of 2020 says that, I think it's a period of 6 months, all of these digital platforms, they call them digital platforms, have in order to start collecting rent from renters. So Airbnb, VRBO, HomeAway, all of those big rental platforms are now legally obligated to collect taxes from rentals. Okay. Now, What taxes? Let's talk about that. These are the taxes that a renter pays, okay? Renters pay two taxes. Renters pay EVA, which is the national value added tax of 16%. In our state of Quintana Roo, they also pay an occupancy tax of 3%. So a total of 19% in tax, okay? Now other states may have other occupancy tax rates, but vacation rentals in the state of Quintana Roo pay both. So you should be collecting already, this is not new, anytime anybody vacation rents, you should be collecting 19% in taxes on behalf of the government, okay? Now, these digital platforms are required to collect that. So if you have gotten emails, I know VRBO has sent them out because I've had some of my clients that rent by owner contact me. VRBO is asking for your tax ID number, okay? And they're asking for your tax ID number, your RFC, your Mexican tax ID number, because you're collecting income that's payable in Mexico, all right? So this loophole is going to start to close, all right? And people are going to have to get on board with paying taxes. So this is what a renter needs to pay. They've needed to pay that as long as those taxes have been in place. But now the onus is on these digital platforms to collect it. What happens if they come to you directly and rent? You have to collect it as an owner and you pay it to the government. But the law that's new obligates these digital platforms to collect and pay it on the bookings that happen through their platforms. Now, this is not new either. Long-term rentals. Long-term rentals also have tax applied if they're furnished. So if you long-term rent, and long-term rent is technically, at least in our state, defined as an annual rental. If it's less than an annual rental and it's 6 months, technically there are no 6-month contracts, but you would still need to pay EVA, okay? If it's furnished, you don't need to pay the occupancy tax, but you do need to pay EVA, all right? If it's unfurnished, there is no EVA to collect, okay? EVA tax to collect. So you're not collecting any tax on behalf of the government if you are renting a long-term unit unfurnished, okay? Any questions about that? Is that making sense so far? We're going to talk about this a little bit more in depth here in just a minute, but I want to make sure I haven't lost anybody. Are we good? Okay. So what does this look like when somebody rents? Somebody rents and they pay me $1,000 to stay in my place for a week. Okay. I have to charge them an occupancy tax of 3%, which would be $30, and an EVA tax of 16%, which would be $160. So I'm collecting $1,190. All right. The $1,000 is mine. The $190 I'm collecting on behalf of the government and paying. If I am a digital platform, then I'm collecting these and I'm directly sending those to the Mexican government, and I'm sending $1,000 to my homeowner. Okay? That's the new law that went into effect January 1st, and I believe they have until June to be compliant on that. Okay? Before we go on, I just want to be clear. When you're renting in Mexico, it does not matter if you collect the money back in the States. It doesn't matter if you collect it in the air. It doesn't matter where you collect it. It is taxable first in Mexico. So you're collecting these, which the renter owes, all right? But technically, you are required. This is income in Mexico. Oops, didn't mean to fast forward. This is income in Mexico, this $1,000. So you should be paying your income tax, your ISR tax on this $1,000. Okay, and you should be paying it in Mexico. Now, as you guys know, if you've taken any of the other webinars I talk about this, there are tax treaties between the United States and Mexico, and between Canada and Mexico, where you're not double taxed. So if I end up paying tax on that $1,000 in Mexico, let's say Mexico says I owe $5 on it, right? And then I take it back, and in the United States, they say I owe $4. Well, I get $1 of foreign earned income credit. I don't have to pay anything. If I paid $5 in Mexico and the United States government, because I'm a US citizen, says I owe $6, well, I show them my receipt, I've already paid $5 and I only owe $1. So you're not double taxed. but you absolutely have to pay tax. Legally, you have to pay tax on that income in Mexico. It is income earned in Mexico, all right, because the rental is occurring in Mexico. Doesn't matter where the payments are made, all right? What is the ramifications of this? You know, I mean, here's the deal. I think there's a lot of renters that aren't paying their tax on, let me just be frank, there's a lot of people that aren't paying their income taxes on their rentals, okay? I think the opportunity to continue to do that is closing. You know, at this point, they know you're renting your place. They are, Puerto Morelos has absolutely knows which places are available for rent. They have the ability to close rado it, which means they will block access to it until you, and then if they come to you, they make up what they think you made. Okay, and they're going to apply hotel occupancy rates, which are about 86% annually, or over time. So don't let them come up with what you owe. My suggestion is you get compliant, you get with a property manager that'll help you be compliant, you get compliant, and you pay some tax. Because you don't want them coming to you. You're not going to like their numbers. Okay? All right. Moving on, unless anybody else has any questions about those taxes and those new laws. Are we good? All right. I'm not seeing anything, so I'm gonna move on. If you're trying to move money back and forth, these are relatively new, and I just wanted to put them on your radar. If you're moving money back and forth between Canada and Mexico, or the US and Mexico, wire transfers can get really expensive. So if you set up a bank account in Mexico, these are two services. You can download them as an app on your phone. One is called TransferWise. The other one's called Zoom. I looked at these on May 18th. In my experience, usually TransferWise is more favorable unless you're transferring very small amounts. If you're transferring very small amounts, and sometimes that happens, right? Like sometimes it's a charity donation we want to make or something like that. That's a smaller amount. It may be beneficial to use Zoom. Zoom is owned by PayPal, as an aside. But for instance, on May 18th, I looked at transferring $1,000. All right. I had a better exchange rate. $1,000 was converted into 23,755 pesos by TransferWise, whereas I only got 22,905 pesos from Zoom. Zoom says, "Oh, we don't charge anything." Okay, if you're over a certain amount, zero in fees, which sounds great, but actually they make their money on the exchange. TransferWise offers you a much better exchange and a very modest fee, and a lot of times that modest fee more than makes up for it. Okay, so obviously in this circumstance, I was better off paying the $11 and getting the better exchange rate. However, if I only wanted to transfer 20 bucks, let's say it was for a local charity and I was going to toss them $20, it ends up being better to use Zoom. Okay, so my suggestion is try these out. They don't cost anything to start. They're free apps. And that way you have them ready and can use them as the needs arise. And you can they'll always quote you. So before you send it, you can always check in TransferWise and check in Zoom and see which one's giving you the better deal. But I think for larger amounts, you'll often find TransferWise is going to be better. Even with their modest fee, they're just going to give you a better exchange rate. Although I will say that both of these are often better than the exchange rates you'll get from your bank. So bank is not the way to go on this. Okay, let's jump into estate planning. All right. I thought I'd lighten the mood. I found some cute cartoons, so I put them along the way. Estate plan is going to be different for everybody. It really comes down to what assets you have in Mexico. All right. You have your property. And if you have it in a trust, we've already talked about how your trust is already lined out, right? If you have your property in trust, you're the primary beneficiary, you've set up secondary beneficiaries, and you have because you've already called your bank, like I told you to earlier, right? So you've talked to them, that's all set. It's all the other stuff. What else do you have in Mexico? Do you have vehicles? Do you have bank accounts? What else do you have down there of value? Okay. If you have your property in a trust, That's established. You're done. It's all your other stuff. If for some reason you own in the interior of Mexico where you don't have a trust, you very much need to figure out your property and include that in the will, because you don't want it to end up in probate. All right. So really think about the assets that you have. If something happened to you, what do you have in Mexico? Okay. And that's what you need to help plan for. I want you to know that for your trust, okay? Let's say Amber Pierce. I'm going to tell you what mine is. Amber Pierce, I'm a primary beneficiary. I have 2 boys. They are the secondary beneficiaries. One gets 50% and one gets 50%. If I die, half of the ownership goes to one, half of the ownership goes to the other. Okay. That's all fine and well, all right? If you don't know what happens, your beneficiaries are going to contact your bank. If I die, they're going to contact the bank and say, there's a trust, file number so-and-so. If you have that file number, right, that we talked about. My name is, so-and-so. I'm a secondary beneficiary listed on this trust. My mom has passed away, and I'm contacting you because I need to initiate the transfer, okay? There is an administrative process that the bank uses to do that. And this is why trusts are so helpful. People complain about trusts. I said, no, you know what? They may not do a thing for you while you're alive, but they're very helpful if you croak. And that is because you avoid probate in a foreign country. All right. Here is what you're going to need to do. Your beneficiaries, if you die outside of Mexico, okay, so if you pass away in your home country, US, Canada, wherever, your secondary beneficiaries are going to have to show up with a death certificate that's been apostilled. An apostille is a seal. If you're in the US, an apostille is a seal that basically allows Mexico to know it's an authentic foreign document. Fun fact, Canada is not in that treaty. So Canada, you don't have apostilles. You have to actually go through your Mexican consulate to have those verified. Okay? But they're going to take your death certificate. You're going to either verify it with an apostille in the States or through a Mexican consulate in Mexico. The bank will get those translated for them. And with that, that is proof that you have passed away and the trust is transferred. Is there a cost? Absolutely. Okay. Your beneficiaries are going to have to pay the admin fees the bank charges. They're going to have to charge the notary fees that the notary charges to update the public records. And they're also subject to acquisition tax. Okay. There's a tax on that. You're receiving something of value. In our municipality, that's 3.3% of the value. So let me grab a piece of paper here and just make sure we're still talking about apples and apples. Let's say I had a property that was valued at 1,000,000 pesos. Okay. 1,000,000 pesos. And I pass away, all right? And my kids are going to get this property. So one gets 50% and one gets 50%. So let's say it's at 1,000,000 pesos is the value. And so that means that 500,000 peso of asset would go to one and 500,000 peso of asset would go to the other. On 500,000 pesos, that acquisition tax is 16,500 pesos. So right now about $900. Okay. You are going to need to plan for that. All right. In your estate, I don't know, it's up to you. I mean, you could just say, kids, you're on your own, you're paying that tax. Or if you want to make some arrangements so that there is money set aside so that they receive that at no cost, right, in Mexico. If you want to make plans so that they have those taxes and fees covered, I would say set aside about, we're looking at maybe 4.5% to 5%, maybe total. Depends on the value of the property, really, but the notary fees and the bank fees and things like that, on top of whatever acquisition tax you have. If you have questions about this and how much it would be as your estate planning, so you make sure you set aside what you need, talk to your bank. Okay, have your bank work with a notary and get you a quote so that you know. All right. At minimum, I know you have to pay the acquisition tax. In our municipality, it's 3.3%, but your bank's going to have a fee, and that fee is going to vary by bank. And then the notary fees can be estimated. So all I'm saying is if you don't want your kids to be in a position to have to come up with that money out of pocket, make some plans for that. Okay? What about everything else? What if you have either property that's not in trust because you own in the interior of Mexico, or you have cars and you have bank accounts and everything else? My best suggestion is get a Mexican will. Oddly, there's a will month in Mexico. It's September. Okay. Every September, they're half off. Now, if you want to pay full price for a will, that's fine if you happen to be there in other months. But if you happen to be in Mexico in September, it's will month. At least it is in our state. And maybe other states have different will months. I don't know, but September is at least the will month for the state of Quintana Roo. They're half off. Go in and get yourself a very simple will. Explain to the notary, I want very basic assets. I want somebody to be in charge of them, right? Even if you just put your executor in charge of it so that they can come down and deal with it. All right, get a Mexican will, stipulate that. There are some things that they say that a U.S. will, if it gets translated, can be used. I will tell you that you're better off. The Mexican wills are not expensive. I would highly recommend you just get one in Mexico. They're already going to be translated. Okay, they're going to be in Spanish. Your U.S. will would have to be authenticated, translated, and then maybe not worded the way it should be. And frankly, I don't think you really want to put your kids through that at that time. So you're better off just get a Mexican will written that governs what you want to have happen in Mexico. They can show up, it's in Spanish, and get it done. Okay? And it's in the format that all the banks and things will recognize. Okay? So at least, even if your property is in trust, at least if you have vehicles and bank accounts and things like that of value, get a will to cover those. What happens if you pass away in Mexico? All right? So you have a property down there and you pass away and you're here. What happens? You need to let your next of kin know, whoever that is, who may or may not be your will executor, okay? But generally the next of kin is the one that has to contact your consulate for assistance. So if you're an American citizen, they're going to contact the U.S. consulate in Mexico. If you're Canadian, they're going to contact the Canadian consulate in Mexico, and the consulate will walk them through what they need to do in order to make arrangements for you if you've passed away in that foreign country. Okay. And there's probably going to be some costs, and the costs are going to depend on what you want done. I mean, if you're going to be cremated in Mexico, or if you're going to haul a body back, right? Whatever your final wishes are, you might want to take a look at those costs and plan for it. Why I mention this is only because I want you to kind of have a plan. Start a shared, again, do a Google Doc file, right? Share it with your executor, share it with your next of kin. Just have a conversation with them about it, so that, because truly, if somebody passes away abroad, they're going to be emotionally distraught anyway. How does that work? Just knowing, hey, you're going to call the consulate and this is the website address that will get you to that will be helpful. Put that copy of your property deed in there. Put the copy of all the trust bank information that you found out, your name of your rep, your file number, all that kind of stuff. Put copies of your passports up there. Put the copy of your Mexican will in there. Maybe put a copy of your U.S. will in there, your home country's will, right? If they need apostilles on things, talk to them about that, what that would look like. Or if they need a consulate, what that would look like, okay? Copies of any vehicle titles that you have in Mexico. Copies of any bank account information that, are down there, so that they don't just go down and go, I have no idea, right? So get that information together. I really suggest that you put those copies into a shared document file that's online, and you can share that with them and they can have access to that. And that will be immensely helpful. They can always contact the consulate if they need help through that process. But that's really what you want to kind of have in consideration. And then also, if there are costs for your last wishes, as far as, cremation or whatever, maybe take that into account, and certainly the cost of transferring that trust to them. If you want to take care of that for them, I want you to just be aware of it so that you can take care of it if you'd like. Okay? That, I think, Yes. Okay. That gets through all the information that I wanted to talk to you about tonight. We mentioned some webinars, like the one about the visa and the capital gain tax, which you need to understand if you are if you own property in Mexico. You got to go to our YouTube channel. So how do you get to our YouTube channel? I am going to show you. Bear with me just one second. I'm pulling up our website. Okay. So if you go to our website, myinriveraproperties.com, and I'll give you that website address here in just a minute as well. If you scroll down to the bottom, there are some social media icons, and one of them is YouTube. And if you click that, it goes right to our YouTube channel, which is also screenshotted on my slide here. But it's going to go to the YouTube channel. And the first playlist that we have are all these webinars. Okay, so if you look through these webinars, right here's the one on understanding capital gain. They're hiding. That's the visa one. Right there's the visa one. Okay, those are the two that I mentioned. There may be other ones in there. We also do considerations for Canadian citizens and US citizens. We talk to accountants and any kind of special filing requirements or things that you have. I'll warn you, accountants are accountants. They're not always the most entertaining, but it's really great information if you're a US citizen or Canadian citizen and wonder what kind of obligations you have tax-wise in your home countries when you're living abroad. Those are there. So really great resource for you to check out other information. This whole series I mentioned, we do them every month. If you want to, join in on other ones, go to our blog, portamorelosblog.com. You can either get to it from our website, which I just had up, or you can go straight there. And on the right-hand side, there's a subscribe, and you can put in your email address. We put just a few posts up per month. You'll get one usually, or maybe 2 posts per month in your inbox. It won't flood your inbox, but what we do is at the beginning of each month, we post our webinar lineup. So if you want to kind of be in the loop on that so that you can join in on other ones, definitely do that. We ask that you share our webinar. So, you'll get a link with a YouTube video. Share it if you will. This webinar series, we do, and we promote via word of mouth. So we always appreciate you sharing it and helping us promote it so that more people find out about it. This is all my contact information, my email, our website, as well as the blog, which you can either, like I said, get to from the website or jump right into the blog. Okay, so with that, what kind of questions does anybody have? Either about what we talked about or about whatever you want me to try to answer, and I am happy to try to answer whatever questions you have. And you're welcome to turn on your mic and ask, or drop them in the chat box if you don't have a mic. Nobody has any questions, really? That's totally fine if you don't. If you, and some of this stuff, like estate planning and things like that, may be questions that you have and you want to ask me directly, you're welcome to send me an email. Again, I'm not an attorney, but I can at least help you, point you in the right direction if I can help you in any way. Polly, you are so welcome. I'm glad it was helpful. I'm glad you got good info out of it. You're very, very welcome. Like I said, I enjoy doing these, so it's my pleasure. Anyone else before we hang up for the night? Or we sign off for the night? Are we good? I want to make sure I get your questions answered if you have them.
Thanks, Amber.
Hey,
We'll
you're
see
so
you this fall.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? It was kind of interesting. They just came out. I don't know if you saw this. So the border has been closed. The actual physical border with Mexico and US has been closed. And they just renewed that until the end of June.
Yeah, I saw that.
You're gonna, I think, still be able to fly, but the car traffic has been, they haven't really. What was interesting is I was gonna update everybody on it tonight, but the consulate hasn't updated their website yet. So check out if you kind of want to know what's going on with that, because it's a little confusing. I'll be honest. I was trying to follow it today, and the US, let me pull this up. The US government had a press. Let me see if I can find this website here. You can see my search history on this today.
Mm-hmm.
They ended up. I wonder if I can pull up this same sheet. They have like a fact sheet. Let me see if I can find that really quick. Anyway, so they had put out this press release yesterday that was really clear that it was just border. And then there were some news reports today that talked about it also including tourists and that they were extending the whole thing. And so, to me, it wasn't really clear then what was being extended. And so I always rely, here it is. Okay. So, I always rely on this website for a lot of things. I'm going to put this link in the chat box for everybody. They update all sorts of, oh, here we go. They have updated it. Look, okay. So, they had not done this at like 6 o'clock when I checked it before I signed in because I thought I'd update you guys on this. It says, so you're reading this as I am.
Land border crossing.
Yeah, limit the border crossing for to essential travel. But it says, notice it says land border crossings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
D,
not following within, and then what it doesn't say, will this mean for airline travel? This action does not apply to air, rail at this time. Okay, so it looks like you will be able to fly in.
So far.
And that was something that was sort of up in the air after the media had posted about this. So I'll actually share this on our Facebook page too, because they have finally updated it. I checked it at, like I said, about 5:30 or 6 o'clock tonight, and they hadn't updated it. So I guess that does clarify that it really is just the land border, like the press release had mentioned.
Yeah.
So you should be able to get back without a problem.
Yeah. I don't think we'll be back until fall, but anyway. So thank you.
Well, if you're back in September, it's Will month. Don't forget.
I know. I know that. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Amber.
You're so welcome.
Yeah. Thanks for your help.
Hey, you're so welcome. If I can help you in any way, please let me know if you have any follow-up questions on it. I think we're good. All right, you guys have a great night. It was great chatting with you, and have a good night.
Why did you walk